This is Aaron Mesh with Willamette Week, and today I'm talking with Jenn Cairo, the city forester for the city of Portland, head of the urban forestry program for Portland Parks and Recreation. It's been a busy week for the urban forestry program, thanks to an ice storm that downed limbs and entire trees across the city, starting on the early morning of February 15, as I recall. Since then, Jenn, how many incidences Portland Parks and Recreation responded to?
Yeah, Aaron, we've received almost 800 separate requests for tree issues in streets and city properties.
What kind of things are you seeing when you arrive?
Mostly it is broken down branches. Sometimes it's whole trees that have been broken off. The weight of the ice coupled with really wet soils meant that some trees just didn't fare very well.
Oh, so the wet soils means that entire trees went, right?
Yes, that can happen, and it did in some cases.
What's the biggest tree you saw go?
Gosh, there were a few really large ones. There's actually one in Columbia Park in North Portland near the building there, the swimming pool, that's quite large.
Is there a certain kind of tree that tended to go down more than others, or is it just anything that's got soft soil or heavy ice on the branches?
Yeah, because it was really an ice event, it didn't impact specific species in particular. It impacted a number of different species of trees. Sometimes if it's wind or it's just saturated soils, extremely wet soils, so that the rooting substrate is a little loose, then we see it impacting certain species more than others. But this was more broad-based.
Any neighborhood in particular?
Well, it was also all over the city. In general, though, in Portland, I know we all think of ourselves as a really tree city and very green, but a lot of our trees are in the central southeast part of the city and the west side, the West Hills. So that's where we always, including this storm, see the most impacts when there are storm activities. The canopy in Portland is pretty dramatically inequitably distributed. So on the east side of the river, where 80% of us live, the canopy is around 21% covered. That's on par with Los Angeles, which I think we don't think of as being as green. While the west side, the canopy cover over there is a lot higher. It's actually 56% on the west side. So it's quite a disparity. And when there's a storm, the impacts follow where the trees are.
That makes sense. Where does this event rank in your memory?
Yeah, this one, I'll go past my memory. I've been in my position going on 9 years, but we have team members in urban forestry who've been here for getting close to 30 years. And this is the most significant tree impacts from storms that we've seen in that whole time.
Wow, they're a 30-year storm in that sense, at least tree-wise.
Yeah, and maybe even more than that. That's certainly more impactful than recent memory.
What's the most interesting thing you saw in the last couple of weeks?
I think the most interesting thing I saw was that our arborists managed to get to work in spite of roads covered in ice and snow. And it was Monday morning on the holiday. It was the President's Day holiday when everyone in the city was supposed to be off work. But they were there bright and early, and we're in a Bobcat clearing the ice and snow out so we could get to our buildings and our vehicles, and the power went out at some point in there too. So generators had to be hooked up because we have to go no matter what when there are trees and roads. You think about people getting to hospitals, ambulances, fire trucks, police response. We need to respond and get those things cleared for them. So that was the most interesting thing. It was pretty challenging conditions and some dedicated work by our team.
I believe it. I mean, 800 calls is a lot of trees.
Yeah, that is, and that's separate ones. We get a lot of duplicate calls. Understandably, different people will see the same situation and report it. And it's great that they let us know so we can address it. But yeah, we're near 800, which is a lot.
What is that, like even 1% of the city's tree canopy or less than that?
Oh, it's far less than that. You know, Portland, we have 220,000 street trees. So those are the trees along the roads, public roads. And then we have around 1.2 million trees on parks properties. And then there's probably that much again, if not more, on private property that aren't counted. So it's a lot more than 800. It's a very small percentage. However, because a lot of the trees that are an issue when they fail that create problems are along roads, we notice them a lot more than that small percentage of the whole canopy.
I had a reporter speculate and then eventually made some calls and decided this wasn't true, but was wondering, the sort of contrarian take, gosh, does Portland have too many trees if they're falling into the road at this rate in an ice storm? What's your take on that?
Yeah, again, it's a small percentage of the trees and weather happens. And we need far more trees in Portland than we have already. We have to think about why are trees important to us. I'm sure a lot of us believe trees are pretty and nice to have. And what would Portland be without its trees? Because we're known for being green and having a lot of trees. The things that folks probably don't think about and kind of take for granted is trees are a source of oxygen for all of us. They clean the air we breathe from pollutants, from car exhaust and other things. They also give shade in the summer, and with the climate crisis and there being more urban heat island effect, so hot areas in the city, it's increasingly important to have trees there to cool temperatures in the summer. They have numerous positive health effects for people, things like reducing stress in urban life, speeding up recovery times when folks are sicker in the hospital. And they also buffer pedestrians from traffic when they're along streets and slow traffic speeds. So how quickly a person drives down the road is actually slower when there are trees involved. And their habitat for wildlife, they filter and contain stormwater flows instead of those having to be cleaned and contained through municipal systems. So those are examples. The list actually goes on. So even there are costs to a lot of things, or challenges, needs with a lot of things that we have to have in our daily lives. And there are some with trees. When there's a storm, sometimes trees come down, but they're more than worth it, and we need more of them than we have.
That's a great answer.